All right, got the audio going.
Welcome everybody to the podcast. Welcome back. This is episode 5, right?
Yeah, episode 5.
Episode 5. It feels like we've been doing this forever, but that's because we had another podcast. So even though this is episode 5, it's not really episode 5. It's more like episode 60.
Yeah, this is like the 60th podcast that we've done.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah. But you were saying that you had also been thinking of free will lately, because I had been thinking of free will. I had been thinking about it.
Yeah, so for context, before this, Josh and I were like, what should we talk about? And he was like, I've been thinking about free will lately. And I was like, huh, me too.
How convenient.
So, because I read about it in my last class, and we were talking about free will on Monday. So we've talked about the problem of evil before, right?
Right.
There's also the problem of free will. That's another concept. And we talk
the problem of evil is that's part of the whole God thing, right?
We can explain that. We'll get into this. It'll be fun.
Yeah,
but we'll start. So free will. So we were talking about that, and it was interesting because we got introduced to 3 ideas that people have of free will, and I thought it was really interesting. Most people, I don't think, realize this. Most people are libertarians, not the political ideology libertarianism, but libertarians in terms of their ideas of free will. The reason so basically that concept of free will is that humans are free to do what they want, and the laws of physics and nature don't necessarily apply to us. I'm not saying that I can fly. That's not what I'm saying. But it's an idea of free will that people have. It more so, I think what it is people don't really think about science
themselves,
our brains, the way that we kind of do impulsively make decisions, and we think we're in complete control. That's what it is. We have complete control.
Right.
And when I say the laws of physics, the laws of nature, neuroscience, the way our brain works, the impulse reactions, things like that. You don't really control that, but most people think that they do.
I see. Okay, I see what you're saying. So you're talking about kind of the more kind of general ignorance of these kind of natural bodily functions, neurological functions, and things like that.
Yes.
And how we tend not to think of those things, and we tend not to realize the way that they impact our decision making or our cognitive abilities, or the way that we, just do anything really, right? And how they, in fact, will determine things, even though we think that we're in complete control of the things and everything that we do and whatnot. Okay.
Exactly. And then there's another idea. There's 2 other ideas. The second idea, which is where I fall, and where a lot of scientists and philosophers fall, is this idea that I have free will to an extent because I recognize that there are certain things that I really don't control. I don't control the chemistry in my brain, and we know for a fact that does impact our decision making to an extent, right? Yeah. So it's recognizing that we don't have complete control over our decisions, while also recognizing that we still have some.
Right.
Okay. Then there's hard determinism, and that basically says we don't have free will. Everything comes down to physics, and we are all just abiding by that. The reason it all comes down to physics is this. Biology can get reduced to biochemistry. Biochemistry gets reduced to chemistry. Chemistry gets reduced to physics. And we understand that. So the reason that's important is understanding our brains and the way they work, the way that neurons fire off and all that stuff, and understanding the chemical makeup of our brains and how certain things affect our decisions, like how dopamine makes us feel and how we kind of crave dopamine and things like that. And basically it comes down to we're just like anything else in space, for example. And it's that it can seem very random and it can seem random, but really it's not. It's actually this very structured thing that you are not in control of at all, because it's literally just atoms and biology is going on.
And that's the view of hard determinism.
That's the view of hard determinism, but you don't have free will.
Right.
And then there's ideas of that you don't have free will within spiritual practices, which that's a whole nother topic. Like that's what the Stoics believe. That the Stoics didn't think we necessarily had free will. They thought we did to an extent, but not entirely. They believed in fate and things like that, which was interesting.
That is interesting. I had a girl ask me that one time. She asked me if I believed in fate, and I found that to be so interesting because nobody has like ever asked me that before.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like saying, you know, like, do you believe in destiny?
That's basically, yeah.
And it's like, what do you mean? Like, you know?
Right.
It just doesn't like, I'm like, fate is like, what is fate? Like, when you say fate, like, do you mean, like, what do you mean? That like certain things are meant to happen in some sort of, you know, like spiritual or cosmic sort of a way, you know? Right? And it's like, I don't think I think that, you know?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. So what do you think? Not so. I think free will in general.
I think we've talked about free will before, and so what I was thinking about the other day was how convincing of an idea free will is. The idea that we have free will. You know, how easy it is to just accept that, because I was thinking about how, you know, in our heads, you know, when we make a decision, it seems obvious to us. It seems, you know, just apparently as apparent and clear as it possibly could that we did that thing. And it seems very difficult to refute that, for example, if I like pick up a glass of water and drink it, that I didn't decide to do that. Right?
Right. And then I think the point so go ahead.
So, and the idea is that, you know, if you decide to do that, like you decided of your own free will to do that. So it seems almost, you know, to be apparently like self-proving that like if I decide to do something, I must have free will, but it actually isn't, right?
No, it's not.
So this is where what I think comes into play, is because I was thinking about just the strangeness of that, how we can make a decision and think that we made a decision, really. But if you believe in something like determinism, and you believe that that all things are ultimately determined, even when we make a decision, it feels to us as though we've made a decision.
Right.
But I personally, I think that you couldn't have actually made a different decision, right?
Right.
So, and we've talked about this before. We talked about free will a little bit, I think in episode 2 or something like that. And the basic idea, it has to do with time string theory. And that is really complicated, and I don't really know how to explain that super well. But
the basic idea, because I know where you're going with this, because we've talked about it before. The basic idea, if time is a line, and I'm not going to say it's for sure time string theory.
Conceptualizing it like this.
Huh?
You're just conceptualizing. You're like conceptualizing it in this way that like time is a line.
So time is a line, right? Conceptually, I don't know. I don't think we actually know. But let's say time is a line, right? And this is point A, this is point B, and we're just somewhere on here. If that is true, and this is set, and this is set, and we're just somewhere in the middle, we don't have free will.
Because like technically, it's like technically if the past is set, then like the future is also set. Because if we conceive of time as being like a line, like you said, there's like an A and a B, then we could say A is like infinitely into the future and B is like infinitely into the past, and we're somewhere on there. The idea basically is that all the future is already set. Yeah. As much as the past is already set.
Right.
You know,
with that conception of time. If that is true, if just like the past, which we know is set, and if the future is the same way, we literally cannot have free will. It doesn't make sense because the future is set. What is going to happen is going to happen, and nothing that we do will change that.
I would say it's like as if we think the past is set, because I would say we couldn't actually know the past is set unless we were also willing to say that the future is set. But some people don't believe that the future is set because they think that they have, free will. Like you have the ability to make decisions, change the outcomes of things in the future. But I would say that because you don't know the future, you couldn't really change the outcomes because you don't know what they are yet. And you won't know until they've come to pass, at which point you won't be able to change them. Right. You know? So, because the other way of looking at it, though, is if you think that they can change, then you would also have to say that you would be able to theoretically go into the past and change things. Because to say that the future is not determined is also to say that the past is not determined, because that would be to say that, you could have done something differently in the past and there could have been a different outcome. Right. Right. And so with like the idea of 10 dimensions or 11 dimensions, there are kind of different ideas about the number of dimensions, but that either of those ideas, they, both have to do with time string theory, and they both have to do with this idea of conceptualizing time as this kind of straight line, this sort of 1D plane that extends infinitely into the past or into the past and the future. And with either theory of the dimensions, you'll have one timeline. So you'll like have the timeline that we know, the history that we know, and the future that we'll come to know and that will come to pass. But instead of it being that we can change this time that we're on, the idea is that we can't change this time, but there are other times, sort of, And so there's like the timeline that we're on, and then there's like another one next to it, and there's one above it, and they represent like different things. So like in a parallel timeline, things may happen differently. That's not to say that things can happen differently on any particular timeline, only that there are other alternate timelines where things do happen differently. And it's not necessarily to say that we can hop from one timeline to another, or that that's necessarily even the case. But that's just one idea, Yeah.
Yeah, I heard one interesting idea I don't believe it, but I think it's interesting. And this is idea. Well, I mean, I wouldn't know though. So there's this idea that there are timelines, like you said, right? There's an infinite number of them. Mm-hmm. And the reason that there's an infinite number of them is because there's an infinite number of possibilities and decisions that can be made. And it's a complicated idea. It's not that complicated. There's an infinite number of timelines and an infinite number of decisions. And in each of those things where something is slightly different, where someone could have made a decision you're drinking tea right now. Let's say you decided to drink coffee. Well, there's a timeline where you drank coffee, right? Right. I mean, it gets into like minuscule shit like that. And it's interesting.
Where like you didn't scratch your nose and another one you did.
Right. Yeah. Interesting, sure. I don't know. But that's another idea that I think is interesting.
Yeah, but it all ties back into that idea of like free will, though. And it's like I said before, it's just bizarre because no matter what you believe, I think it's just so bizarre to think that like you are making a decision that could potentially affect the outcomes of things in the future, or that will define the outcomes of things in the future. Because obviously we can see things like the butterfly effect. We can see how like one thing leads to another thing and it just cascades. But whether or not it would be possible to actually have a different outcome. Mm-hmm. I mean, unless we can actually test it, like you will never really know. We can only ever kind of, talk about it and hypothesize and things like that. Right.
Yeah, that's true. When it comes to things like that, like free will, right? I mean, are you basically saying that like you can't ever really know if you do or don't have it? Is that what you're saying?
I would say, well, I think that you know, because there's been like a lot of good thesis and doctoral work that's been done on this, and there's like a lot of smart people who put their head into this, and I think that ultimately we would, you know, you would have to prove that something like time travel maybe could work.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of people think that it can't work, that we can't really, that it would never be possible to time travel in like a kind of traditional conception of time travel, you know, where you could like go back in time to like a certain point, you know, like you could go back to the Civil War or something and like actually be there, like, you know. So I think that, you know, like you couldn't really know like how things would play out differently because you literally can't go back in time and change anything, you know?
It's all hypothetical at that point. You're guessing.
Yes, exactly. And so likewise with the future, you can't really know the future, and you can't really know how what you do now will affect the future. I mean, sometimes it's obvious, you know, like you get a job, you make money.
Right.
You know, but you know, other times when we're guessing at the future, and that too is ultimately, that's just like a guess, like you expect to get paid.
I was about to say that
until it actually happens and you get your paycheck, you could technically say that I think rationally you should have some doubt that you will not get paid or something like that. You know?
So that's okay. So that's basically how all of science works when you think about it. Is we make these assumptions that, well, this is going to happen because this is what's happened before, and we expect it to continue. The sun is going to rise in the east and set in the west. I
like how you had to like think about the direction.
I was like, right, but the sun rises in the east, sets in the west. I can tell you with almost 100% certainty that it is going to rise in the east and it is going to set in the west tomorrow. Can I know that with 100% certainty? No.
Not until it comes to pass, but we have enough evidence to suggest that that will almost certainly be the case.
If I drop this hat, if I let go of it, is it going to fall? Oh, it fell. Is it going to do it again? It did.
It's like gravity, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you don't always know that that's going to happen. I mean, you do, but you don't. Here's the problem with this line of thinking, right? I think it's very interesting. I just think it's completely impractical.
Of course it is, yeah.
But it's fun, so we're going to keep doing it. But I do think it's really impractical. Like, I don't think it... Do I know that the sun is going to rise in the east and set in the west tomorrow? Okay, technically no, but do I know that? Yeah. Do you know that? Yeah. Can you technically know that with absolute certainty? No. But does that matter? Probably
also
not.
No. Yeah, no. Because for all in, you know, for all that we care, you know, it might as well just be true. Like, we have the idea of like...
Right.
You know, it's like that things are like proven, which technically in science nothing is ever proven. It's only supported more and more strongly. But we don't usually think about things like that, you know? Mm-hmm. And so something is like this is this thing that we have with like any innocuous thing, anything that's just like that we take for granted and that we take for as guaranteed, you know? Like we take it as a guarantee that like the sun is going to rise. Mm-hmm. At all, you know, because we have like 24-hour days, and we have this whole like you know, way that we conceive of time, which is entirely centered around our evolution on this planet, because that's only how things work on this planet. You know, the sun only rises at certain times every day here. You go to Mars, your 24-hour clock doesn't work anymore, right? You know, in terms of like a 36-hour clock or something. So, which would be interesting, you know, when people actually go to Mars, like how are they going to adjust to that? But that's a different topic. Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, so we take these things for granted, but like ultimately is like we were saying before, like until they come to pass, you don't
know.
You can't really know, you know, but there are just so many things in life that are like that because like you were saying, also, it's just impractical to think in these kind of philosophical terms, you know, and those or in this kind of like scientific way, but there's like a practical, there's like a time and a place basically for that kind of thinking is what it is, you know. And it's like when you're trying to know something, or you're trying to like learn something, then that's when you start thinking about like, okay, how do I know that the sun is going to rise? And then that's when you realize that it's just because like that's what always happens, you know. And then you think about like how the earth is rotating and all this stuff. But if you think about it, there's actually a multitude of factors that you could consider that would change that, basically. So will the sun rise? Like, yeah, but not if it blows up, you know?
Right. So that's interesting.
Or something, yeah, right? Or not if like the earth, you know, like I guess from the perspective of someone like on the earth's surface, like, then like if the earth gets thrown off its axis or something, right, then it won't rise in the same way anymore, you know?
So there, oh, shit, I forgot what I was going to say.
But I guess technically it will always rise until it isn't there anymore.
Oh, yeah. Well, so I just remember what I was going to say. So a large issue with okay, sure, we'll just call it an issue just for the sake of conversation. Issue with scientific thinking is that, and claims about knowledge, is it's, if I drop this hat, then it will fall if the laws of gravity are holding up, if the gravitational, it doesn't change, whatever it is. When it comes to saying we know this is going to happen, there is always an so long as or if
right
these other things line up. If these things don't line up, this may not happen. But long as these things line up, then we know with almost absolute certainty, not quite, but we basically know that these things will happen. But that's the problem with this line of thinking, is there's always a but.
Yeah.
And as soon as one of those things is off, then your idea of what you know, gone.
Basically, yeah. So, yeah, actually, if you think about it, all of our sort of, you know, these things that, you know, we take for, you know, as like guarantees, that we kind of just know them, you know, and there's more to it than what we say. Like when we say like we know a hat will fall, we don't say we know a hat will fall because of the way that gravity works on this planet, you know?
Right.
We just say that we know the hat will fall, and it's just implied, like everybody knows that the hat's going to fall because of gravity on the planet. But if you think back to before they had an explanation for gravity and what it was and how it worked, like I wonder what they said back then, you know? Like what did they say? Like
well, I can tell you. Know? So, it depended. People had different theories. Aristotle had this really interesting one, and he said that he thought there was 4 elements. If you've seen Avatar, you know what they are. Water, earth, air, fire. He thought everything came down to those basic elements. Oh, and then he thought there was ether, which is what space is made out of. None of this is true. This is just not true. It's completely off. But this is one of the things he thought was that depending on the element that something is, that will determine, okay, something's made of fire. He thought it's going to go up. It's going to go towards the sky. And if it
we kind of had he was onto something there. That's the hot air.
And if it was made out of earth, then it's going to stay with the earth, or it's going to be attracted to the earth. Which, I mean, that's not true at all. Not even close with certain things. Like, things aren't attracted to the earth because their element is made of earth. It's because of gravity. It's something completely different. But
yeah, like you go into space, at some point shit ain't attracted to the earth
anymore. Right. But I mean, how could they have known that, right? And so it's interesting to see, like, oh, okay. So, because here's another interesting thing, right? With the information that they had, right, and the way that they could conceive the world, from a reasoning point of view, they're not wrong. You know what I mean? Like, the way that they could conceive the world and their understanding of science, right? for a long time, Aristotle's worldview is what was accepted.
That we had like these 5 elements or whatever.
Right, and then even more than that, like it gets into like what everything is, but like his concept of motion and why things move. I forget exactly what it is, but it was like, okay, I don't want to butcher it. The point is, it's not actually what it is, but his concept was accepted for a long time. And to be fair though, based on the information that he had, and the way that their sense perceptions allowed them to perceive the world,
that was like the best they could have done.
It was the best they could come up with, and it was considered truth. Now, we talked about this last week. We don't need to get too much into it again. That's not true, right? His conception of why things stayed towards the earth, that's just not actually what it is. But it's interesting because for a long time, the way that people would explain things like that is based solely on their perceptions.
Of course, yeah.
Because the way that they would take it is that their perceptions defined what reality is. And if it's real, then it's true. That was their whole line of thinking.
I wonder how much of the things that we take as like just true today will be like that, in the future. Probably
a lot of things.
I mean, I just wonder if things that seem as like rock solid is like the idea of like gravity, for example.
Yeah.
The same way that he had like that idea back then about how like Earth is attracted to Earth or whatever. In the future, our idea of gravity and, things with mass, having a certain amount of gravity, literally because of how big they are. Mm-hmm. If we'll end up discovering that like actually that's not exactly how it works.
Who knows? Something. Right. I mean, and that's the interesting thing about science is it's constantly changing and shifting.
Yeah. That just seems so crazy though, because such a big idea like that's based on the most basic laws of physics. In order for something like that to change, like everything would have to change basically.
So think about this though, like when you compare like the technology we have now to then, I would say we know, or at least it appears that we know with more certainty than they did, because there seems to be...
We can see things in different ways. We have tools and we have ways of altering our perception beyond just what we see and touch.
And they can... Yeah, exactly. And so because of that technology, it allows us to have a deeper understanding of the way the world actually works.
Right. I think a lot of it was just discovered by like physicists and through like mathematics and things like that. Basically.
Yep. Started with Descartes, and then my teacher. It was funny. So we're reading René Descartes right now, and my teacher made a good point. Mm-hmm. And he said, "I think if René Descartes would have lived another 10 years or 20 years, he'd be the one credited with creating physics, not." Who is it? I forget. I think it was Isaac Newton. Was it
him with the apple and the gravity and all
that? Yeah. But who created like physics, like as a math, like as a practice? Anyways, because Descartes laid the groundwork for that. The stuff that he was talking about was starting to get towards that. He was starting to move into that direction of developing physics, and then he died. So didn't happen.
So interesting thing actually, Galileo he's one important figure that has been noted as a father of modern physics. Albert Einstein's another big one. Yeah, those are the two big ones. And then Isaac Newton is considered the first physicist.
Okay, so I was right
as well. So I guess there are a few important figures in physics. We have like Galileo and Albert Einstein, and then Isaac Newton was before that. He would have probably a lot before that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Fuck, I had a point. Oh yeah, okay, so we were just talking about how do we know things. We got into this last week, actually. Did I bring up Descartes last week?
don't think so.
That the only thing you can... Okay. Brief tangent. And then we should get back to free will, because we've steered way off course. But it's okay.
Yeah.
He said that the only thing in his first meditation, he goes on to expand on this, but one of the things that he says is the only thing that I can know is that I exist.
No, that's right. We did talk about this.
Okay, yeah. Every time I say I am, I exist, I am proving that I am a thinking thing. I don't know that my body exists. I don't know that anything else exists. But that is all I can know. I know that I am a thinking thing.
Yes.
All right. Enough.
And beyond that, we can't even really say what it is that we are. Right?
That's true. And he makes that clear point. He doesn't say that I know exactly what it is. All I know is that I am a thinking thing. He doesn't say what that thing is. He doesn't say that anything else is real. The only thing that I can know, though, is that I am a thinking thing. Mm-hmm. Again, just going with what we've been talking about, that is so impractical, and I don't think it's true. However, it's interesting, because when you get into these concepts of knowledge and truth and what do we know, it's like, well, what do we actually know? Because, and like we just talked about, science doesn't actually provide us with 100% absolute certain answers.
It just gets us as close as we can get.
Exactly. And even then, that's always shifting, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's always a little bit of room for error. But yeah. Even if it's like the tiniest bit of room. But yeah, so this is an interesting question, actually, that like my philosophy teacher would kind of ask sometimes to kind of get classes started off in his introductory course. He would ask questions like why is 2 + 2 2, or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
And like obviously there's like mathematical proofs for stuff like that.
Yeah.
So then like another one he would ask is like, he would give us like certain examples of things. He'd ask us like, what makes this right or wrong? Like, why is this right or wrong?
Ethics, my guy.
You know? Yeah, no, right. And then that's ethics, right? But
oh, that's interesting. So in your intro course, would he cover like different areas of philosophy in general?
I guess so. I mean, he kind of, I guess we sort of touched on a lot of stuff.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, he would start us off with questions of morality and things like that, and we would also talk about, you know, other things. You know, we talk about the classic philosophers and things like that. But
yeah, that's in my intro class. That's what we talked about.
Yeah,
we read the 5 dialogues, Plato's 5 dialogues, and then this is the second time I've read Descartes, because the first time that I read Descartes was in my intro class, and at the time I didn't know what the hell he was saying. Now I'm reading it, and I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't that bad.
Makes a little more sense. Yeah,
but so that's interesting. So we didn't really talk. Okay, so your teacher would ask, what makes this right or wrong? How do we know that this is right or wrong? Yeah. Things like that.
Again, it's just that whole idea of like, how do we know things? How do we know this thing or that thing? What makes that way? Yeah.
Right. So do you know that obviously I'm majoring in philosophy. I know you know that. So but my focus is ethics, and then I think politics and law. And it's interesting because we're learning about different concepts of morality, but the first thing that we started with was, do they even exist? Like, how do we know that? And it's trippy, dude. It's weird to think about, because, you know, I used to be someone that was like, yeah, they exist. And I got to the point where I was like, yeah, I think certain things are objective, and now I'm like, bro, I have no idea.
Yeah, because this is all just what we think, basically. It's just like,
that's what there's actually Philippa Foot. She would say that. She said it's just like etiquette. It's just what people think, but nothing is actually giving it any authoritative, any authority.
Yeah.
Now I do think that certain objective, not absolute things can exist. I'm not saying that they necessarily do. I think they can. But even then, it okay. Like the social contract theory, right? Things are right, wrong, because we as a society agree on general principles. Murdering an innocent person is wrong because we as a society agree that generally speaking, that is wrong because there are consequences to it. And for the sake of society, it would make sense that we shouldn't do this.
Right.
That's generally what I believe. So
I think another way of thinking about things too is that, or another idea is that like things are right or wrong because they're like what we're used to. I think that could be maybe like another way, because I think that maybe not right or wrong in like a moral sense, but like for example, you know, like some people will have like complaints about certain, you know, they'll say that like, you know, like some people might feel that there's a certain way that like society is structured, so that there are like certain things you have to do, you know, for example, and they might call them like your societal customs or whatever. And, you know, like shaking someone's hand to greet them, you know, like to introduce yourself and you like shake someone's hand. This idea that this is like a societal norm, or that it's a custom, or that it's like something that you have to do. Otherwise you're like weird. It's like, why aren't you shaking my hand? The fuck's wrong with you? You know, like, you're like, people like, that's like disrespectful, like not to shake someone's hand actually, right? So we'd say it's like right almost to shake someone's hand.
We would, but I think the problem with that is so that I think most things that people will call moral problems, I don't think really are. I don't think shaking someone's hand is right or wrong. That's entirely, that's like etiquette.
That's why I said like not like morally, right? But like, yeah, you mentioned etiquette, and you mentioned that one girl, she said that it's like, so
that's etiquette though, which you just gave as an example of etiquette, right?
Right.
Because etiquette also uses this is right or wrong statements, but it's different than morals. Well,
exactly.
It depends.
So what I'm saying basically is that there are some things like that to me, it seems like they're just, you know, right or wrong because we're like used to them basically.
Exactly.
And it's not like
I agree.
It's not like anyone said like, oh no, we're going to do things this certain way. There was no like the arbitrary, you know, just reason to just like do this. Like, I say like too much. But the thing is that these things emerged naturally, and that over time we developed these customs, things like shaking someone's hand. And that came to have a certain significance and to be a certain sign of courtesy and respect, you know? So, I don't know. I think that's just another idea.
I think okay. It's not difficult to tell the difference between a moral claim and then just a purely normative claim, which moral claims are technically normative, but they're authoritatively normative. What that means is this. A purely normative statement would be don't eat grape candy because it's bad. That's just an opinion, right? It's a normative statement, but I'm using the word bad. Don't eat grape candy because it's bad. Or if I say, you should eat lemon-flavored candy because it's good. Well, there's no real reason for you to do or not do those things because I'm saying it's good or bad, right? That's completely desire-dependent, and you should act upon your desire in that sense, right? Morality seems to be different because if
it's not a matter of like what you like.
So like if I say this, right? Yeah. Killing an innocent person is wrong. But now let's say I don't think it's wrong. So it doesn't matter because it's purely desire dependent and fuck you. Okay. If morality really is just purely normative, right? And those statements are no different than things like etiquette or other normative statements, then morality is either purely subjective or it doesn't exist.
Right.
But that doesn't really seem to be the case because it does seem like there is rather some sort of authority behind it. And what's interesting is this. We read about a study in my ethics class. And they got a group of kids and they would read them statements like that, or present them with scenarios. You know, At your house, you eat dessert after dinner.
Wait, actually, hold on. I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick. Hold that thought. Alrighty, I'm back. So you were saying the children and the statements.
Yeah, okay. So, there was a study done that we learned about in my ethics course where it was a survey and they asked a group of kids things like this. At your house, you eat dessert after dinner. But at your friend Tommy's house, they eat dessert before dinner. Is that okay? And they'll say, yeah. Because that seems to be like etiquette. It just seems to be something that really is just dependent upon where you are. Mm-hmm. And then they ask them questions like this. At your house, you're not supposed to beat up your little brother. But at Tommy's house, it's okay to beat up his little brother. They all do it. So it's okay, right? And they'll go, no. These are 4-year-olds. They can't tell you why. Right?
Yeah.
They'll just, but they know that there's a difference between those two claims, or those two questions rather.
Between eating dessert before dinner and between beating someone up.
Exactly. And they can tell that there's a difference. And mind you, they've never studied, even if they did read it, they wouldn't know what the hell a theory of morality is.
Yeah.
They don't understand these things that deeply. And yet they're able to tell, well, this is right, this is wrong in a situation like that. Should you beat up Tommy's little brother or not? Even though it's okay there. Well, then they'll go, no.
It's almost like being able to understand that like one of these things has more weight than the other.
And that weight is sort of what people would say is the authority behind morality. Is that because it has more weight, it has more authority.
Right. And then maybe we could say that like that weight maybe has something to do with like the consequences of our actions maybe.
That's what I think. I think it has to do with...
I think that's the most obvious answer.
Yeah. I think it has more to do with consequences, and I think that morality is practical. I think that certain things are right and wrong, and they've been agreed upon as right and wrong because they make sense. Murdering someone for no reason. It makes sense that you shouldn't do that because what are the implications in society? Okay, well, let's see. If I can go down the street and just kill some random person because I feel like it, and that's just okay, and there's no consequences to that, well, then why shouldn't someone else from their family do it to me, and then why shouldn't someone from my family do it to them?
I think it's a matter of recognizing that person is another person. Yeah,
I agree.
Because yeah, so it's like if you think about people who like killing people, basically, it almost seems like you have to kind of be disassociated from them, because someone who you fully humanized is a lot harder to kill them without having some kind of a psychological repercussion for that. Right. In which case you could say that maybe has more weight, right?
Right.
And so that for someone who likes killing people and who's disassociated from people who they kill, they don't really see them as like fully human. They don't really fully recognize them as a person. You could say that like their actions have less weight to them than if, say like another person killed someone like they actually knew. Mm-hmm. Then that would have a totally different impact. That would have like a detrimental impact on their psyche.
Right.
Yeah.
Someone in my class brought up an interesting point because we were talking about like if objective morals, if morality in general exists, and let's say it's objective, if they exist, then why is it that in certain places throughout history, these things haven't been followed? Let's take killing an innocent person, for example, just because it's easy. A seemingly innocent person, because what defines innocence, and I don't want to get too much into that. So let's just sake of conversation, keep it simple.
Like they're guilty of no crime, they haven't wronged anyone.
Right. Okay, simple. In history, right? Let's look at America. Killing a slave would have been nothing. It wouldn't have mattered. It wasn't wrong. right? And
It's just like disposing of property.
And my teacher brought up that point, and he said, you know, if things are really objective, do these people just not understand it? Did they just not... Are people in other places just stupid, and we all of a sudden now have some great understanding? And then someone brought up a good point in class, and I was like, I didn't think about that. And it was... You sort of touched on it, and it was that... Well, no, they actually did believe the same thing we believe, that you shouldn't kill an innocent person. They just didn't view...
Them as people.
Yeah. But they still believed that you shouldn't kill an innocent person. That was still a widely held belief.
Yeah.
And it's just our understanding of, are you a person or not, which seems like really stupid, but unfortunately it's reality.
There are levels to that, though. I mean, that's a lot of times, I think that's how, you know, for most people with kind of a, what you could call a, you know, a normal psyche, and that's just to say that, you know, they think like most people and their mind works like most people's minds, right? So, you know, obviously they're not like psychotic, or they're not, you know,
whatever.
They don't like killing people or something. They're not like serial killers. Yeah. So just like normal people, like your kind of general mind is going to have to sort of not see someone else who they're killing as like a person. Like if you're in a war, you don't have time to like think about, oh, that's another person with a family. It's just that's like, true. No, that's coming to kill me. I got to kill it first.
That's true.
That's it. There's no like, oh, I bet that guy has a daughter. It's like, no. Like, it doesn't matter, you know?
So that's why I think it's important to make a distinction between the ideas of objective and absolute morality. An objectivist would say, killing an innocent person is wrong. Someone who believes in absolute objectivity would say it is always wrong to kill an innocent person. Okay, and here's the distinction. This is an example that's always used in philosophy, in ethics in particular. The train situation, right? The train is on a path to kill 10 people, but if you pull the lever, you save 10 people and you kill one.
Right.
The objectivist would say, hell, even people, whatever, it doesn't have to be an objectivist, but we'll just use that, would say even though killing an innocent person is wrong, it saves the lives of 10 other people. And so that, while an absolute principle, objective principle isn't absolute, it doesn't hold 100% of the time, but it holds most of the time. Someone who believes in absolute morality would say, no, you shouldn't pull it because you're killing someone. Kant would say you're using them as a means to an end, which you're not supposed to do. That was his whole thing. And he, in that absolute view of morality, that no matter what, even though you save 10 people, doesn't matter, it's still wrong. You shouldn't do it.
Because you're killing one
Because you're killing, even if it's just one person, you're still doing it. And it's like, right. Okay.
But then you have the other thing you have to think about too with, you know, I've heard this called like the trolley.
Yeah, exactly.
Or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, where you, and then maybe it's not a train, it's like a trolley and you have the tracks or whatever. But the other thing you have to think about with that is if you have the ability to pull the lever and save the 10 people, is it wrong to not do it? Because that's where people will try and say kind of like, and people do this in our society all the time actually, where they try to say, gotcha. Because they'll give you an example of something and it's like either way, it's just like a undesirable outcome.
Yeah.
You know, because like in that case, it's like someone is going to die no matter what. If you don't do anything, 10 people die. If you do something, you kill one person. So I think that that's something that's interesting to think about, is this idea of, is not doing anything more wrong than doing something, basically.
Is not making the decision, making the decision.
Like, which is more wrong? That's basically what it ends up being.
Right.
Is because obviously it's messed up that we have to kill someone, right? So, but if you don't kill them and you just let the other 10 people die, that's also messed up because you could have saved them.
But you didn't.
But
now,
you didn't.
You're not. So here's the difference, right? Where if you pull a lever and then you kill the one person, you are, without a doubt, responsible for that one person's death because you pulled the lever, causing that person's death. That is true, right? Causing that one person's death. But if you don't do anything, and you just let the 10 people die, you can make an argument for either side. Well, no, you are at fault because you've had the power to do something, but you didn't. Or the other side of that is, well, you're not at fault because you didn't do anything. You didn't actively make the decision to let 10 people die, whereas in the other case, you make the you make the decision to let the one person die, or to kill the one person, I should say.
Or you're still making the decision to let the other 10 people die, though.
But you're not making the decision. But you're not. Okay, so then there's a difference, though, between, or is there a difference, I should ask, between letting 10 people die and killing one person? That's where the difference is.
That's the question.
And then which one is the right decision to make? Letting 10 people die, is that wrong? Or which one's worse, I should say? Letting 10 people die or killing one person? Because there is a difference there, right? In one, you actively make a decision, and in the other one, you passively allow it to happen.
What is the common answer to this question? I think it's usually to save the 10 people, right?
Yeah.
That's usually the common answer.
Well, it depends, though. No, well, it depends. Okay, and I'll give you an example. I'll give you two examples. One where it says that is the right decision, one where it says it's not. Let's use utilitarianism because it's easy to understand. And if you don't know what it is, I'll give you a brief explanation. What is right is what provides the most amount of happiness for the most amount of people. What is wrong is what brings the most amount of harm to the most amount of people. There. It's not the best theory of morals at all, but it's easy for this example. What provides the most amount of happiness for the most amount of people?
Saving the 10.
Saving the 10 people.
Right.
Okay, and killing one person. Okay, so from that perspective, one is clearly the right decision, one is clearly not. The other now, let's use Kant. And he says that you should never use people as a means to an end. Right? If you kill this one person to save 10 people, you are using this one person as a means to saving these 10 people. And he would also say that, again, not only is killing someone objectively wrong, it is absolutely wrong. That holds no matter the situation. And so in that case, the answer is the right decision is to not make a decision. From that perspective. So it depends. But I think the general consensus from a lot of different theories, subjective ones or objective ones, whatever it may be, most people will agree, okay, saving the 10, killing the 1 is the right decision to make.
Or the better decision, really.
Yeah.
Because you can, we could go all, like in The Witcher, how they always have the whole, lesser evil thing.
Yeah, there is no good or bad. There's just...
It's just, you have to just choose the lesser evil, and then Geralt's always like, what if I don't want to choose?
And it's funny because he always ends up having to choose, which interestingly enough ties to this conversation. People can not want to choose all the time, but I feel like most of the times you are kind of forced into choosing between things. In this case,
you'll always have a decision to make, even if that decision is to not act and let things play out. That you're still
that's a decision that you've made.
Exactly. And so there are a lot. This kind of idea of okay, so actually this ties into sort of modern culture really well, because there are a lot of ideas out there that if you don't stand up for something, or if you let something happen, that's as bad as doing it yourself, basically.
Yeah.
Which is not true, obviously. Or is it? Basically,
I don't know.
So right. Basically, this is why this is such a difficult question, because if you put it in a different light, all of a sudden it's like we kind of want to change our answers.
Okay, here, okay. Basically, is being a bystander as bad as being the bully?
Right.
If you're the bystander, right? I'll give you an example. I used to get the shit beat out of me. Right? Mm-hmm. Is the people that watched
or did nothing,
that did nothing, and that made the decision to not make a decision to get involved, are they at as much fault as the bully, the person, right?
Right. It's a similar question to the train problem.
It's a similar question to the train problem.
Because it's just, instead of saying you save 10 people or kill a person, it's just a matter of that one decision of, is it better to intervene or not to intervene, or what's right or wrong? If something bad is happening, is it better to intervene because you can intervene?
Yeah.
Or is it better to not, even though you could? Right?
And I think that that's a difficult question, because let's use just a broad example of bully bystander, just because people know those words. If you allow that, the thing we always hear is don't be a bystander, right? You always hear
you would hear that in school growing up.
Hear that in school, don't be a bystander. Their solution is always go tell an adult. Hint, hint, that doesn't always work. I know. But that's the thing we always hear. Don't be a bystander. And it's like, okay, but what makes being a bystander wrong? You know what I mean? Right. And are you at as much fault
as the bully in this scenario?
As the bully in this scenario.
You see, it's different, and it's not analogous to the train problem, because we could imagine that, the bully is the train and the person that they're bullying is the person on the tracks. If you intervene and you switch the track onto a different track, you're not necessarily killing someone else,
No.
Or you're not necessarily, it's not necessarily the case that you're just going to be moving that bully from the person he was bullying to someone else now. Mm-hmm. Although you might be shifting the bully to you now if you intervene. So, or say if, let's use a more kind of serious example and something kind of more relatable, is if someone is getting mugged in an alley or something.
Right.
This might be more relatable for city people.
Right.
If you walk by an alley, or if you're on a busy street or anything, so anywhere where and just someone's getting mugged,
mm-hmm.
Intervening probably means shifting that person's attention from the person that they're mugging to you. So it's different.
And then the question is, again, is it wrong
to walk by
and let it happen? And that's the thing. Because you still, by choosing to not get involved, you have made a decision to let it happen. That is still true. But is that necessarily wrong? Because think about it. Self-preservation. If
it's ultimately,
is it wrong?
You're saying, you have to say, am I more important than that person? And almost everyone will value their own safety. And so they wouldn't get involved. Right?
Exactly. And, is that wrong to do? Is it wrong to see a stranger getting mugged in an alley and go, I'm not going to do anything because I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to get involved. This isn't my problem. Does it depend on your reasons? Right? Is it more or less wrong if your reason is, well, I don't want to personally get hurt? Okay. Or is it, I don't care, this is a stranger, this isn't my problem? Those are two but those are two different reasons for doing the same thing, right?
What's interesting is I think most people would probably say that it's understandable if you don't get involved. It's understandable that you wouldn't want to risk yourself, your own harm in that situation.
Right.
In order to prevent someone else from being harmed, basically. But in terms of if it's right or wrong, that seems almost like an impossible question to answer, right?
Right.
Even though different philosophical theories and different perspectives and different views of things will give you different answers as to what's right and what's wrong and what you should and shouldn't do, the reality of the situation is, do you want to make yourself the subject of that mugging in order to spare someone else potentially? Or is it better to just let that happen, basically, because someone's still going to get mugged either way.
Exactly. That's a good point.
Yeah.
How two people might.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, maybe.
You've now got
maybe
involved. Now two people did.
It could be worse, you know?
Right.
Like, if a guy has a gun and you intervene, you could just end up getting shot.
You know, I think the thing with morality is that, mind you, this is coming from somebody who does believe certain things are, to an extent, objective. There's still gray area. There's a lot of gray area. I think that's the thing with morality in general, is there is gray area. Morality is not black or white. Things are not simply right or wrong. It's not that simple. It is much more difficult than that.
There's a sliding scale because every decision kind of has a different weight to it.
Exactly. Exactly. In the case of the bystander watching someone get beat up, I would say that that's, well, I mean, I don't know, but rather, is that as bad as the bystander watching someone get mugged? Right? Those are different scenarios, right? One, I would say, is more extreme than the other.
And you could just keep making it worse.
And you can just, exactly.
Yeah.
You can keep going further and further down that rabbit hole. But let's just stick with those two, right? Because, you know, you're a bystander in both. Which one is it worse to be a bystander in? And I would argue, or I would think that, well, one can be worse and is worse than the other because morality is that sliding scale. Mm-hmm. It's got gray area. There's black and white. Is it more wrong to watch somebody potentially get killed in front of you? Or is it more wrong to watch somebody get beat up in front of you? I think the answer there, if you ask most people, is kind of obvious. I think most people would say, well, it's probably more wrong to let somebody die potentially and get robbed. You know?
Right.
Than children beating each other up. I think most people would go, okay, that there's clearly one that's worse.
Right, yeah.
And I think that goes to show that that's where a problem lies in absolute morality. It's like, well, no, things aren't black or white. Things aren't this simple thing because you can take the same.
It's not a matter of just right or wrong. It's more like how right or how wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's... I think that's something that a lot of people forget. Because I think today, we try to see things as very black and white, even though we claim we don't. We do. People do. You know.
It's easier, right?
It's
kind of more natural to have sort of pre-programmed ideas too.
Of what
just like how we'll think of certain things. You just have your kind of your automatic answer. So I call it sort of like pre-programmed. It's sort of like ideas of things that you have. Just so that you don't have to think about it, you know?
Exactly.
That way you can just make quick decisions about things, you know? Is killing right or wrong? Well, killing's wrong, you know? Like, you don't think about it. You don't make it more complicated than it needs to be. It's just the basic answer to that question, is killing right or wrong? Oh, killing person is wrong, right?
Right.
And then we because unless you're having a conversation about it, that's going to be sort of maybe your automatic answer. Or probably like an even better example is just like maybe a better example of a pre-programmed sort of an automatic answer would just be really anything that you just kind of have on your like what you might call it, you know, anything that you just have like ready to go basically, so that you don't have to think about it, like shortcuts, like shortcuts on a desktop. It's so that you can just click on that thing and go right to it, as opposed to having to go through the whole path and work it all out and then come to that same decision, you know, even though depending on the case, you might say that something's right or wrong, or your answer to something might be yes or no. You'll have like a pre-programmed answer for something, you know, easy. Right. Because it's easier, because it's quicker. Exactly. It's faster. It's more practical. Right.
Right. I agree. But okay, so while I do think what you're saying holds up in most cases, I okay, let's take the example of the mugger. I don't actually think in that situation people are thinking what's right or wrong, because I think, okay, you know what, let's use your example. I think if you ask people the quick right, wrong, if you want to think of it black and white, which you shouldn't, but if you were going to in this situation, I think it's obvious what the right decision is.
Yeah.
Don't be a bystander, right?
Right. But in practice,
it's not always like that. So I think when it comes to moral decisions, I think it depends on the situation. I think if you ask someone, is killing someone right or wrong, they'll go, it's wrong, right? Quick, boom, done. Put someone in a real world situation, is being a bystander right or wrong, right? If you ask them that question, they'll say it's wrong. But if you put them in the situation, I guarantee you, well, I can't guarantee you, I feel like most people probably would be a bystander. You know what I mean? Even if they think it's wrong, they'll still do it for the sake of their own self-preservation or whatever it is.
Right.
So while I do think that people think of morality in black and white, it's funny because people don't necessarily always act that way. Like I said, in this situation, you ask someone what... I'm not going to keep...
I think we can know things too and have certain feelings about things and ideas about things that we don't follow. You know, it's kind of like this thing of like, you might give someone... Well, this is a different thing actually, but like you could like give someone advice, but you don't take your own advice.
Practice what you preach, that whole thing.
Yeah, and then and then there's also the idea of like, practice what you preach. And I think a lot of times we will maybe sort of say certain things, but in practice that doesn't necessarily hold up, right? So I want to go back to the trolley example real quick, because the idea of, say, like you interfering and you know, shifting the track, I think we could change it so that, you know, like the idea of you interfering with a mugging or something, maybe we could make that more like you have to shift the track, but in order to shift the track, you get hit by the train. So now it's not you kill someone else. Now it's a sacrificial action. So now it becomes basically you get hit by the train or you let 10 people die. And I feel like almost everyone would say like, now it becomes like your answer becomes a lot more lenient. Like no matter which way you go, people will say like, that's understandable. Like that sacrificial action is understandable because even though you get hit by the train, you save 10 people. And also not doing it is understandable because it's suicidal, you know?
That's a good point. I think you're right. I think most people's answer they'll go, huh? Because you put yourself in that situation and all of a sudden it becomes more difficult. Because at that point, I don't think people's first instincts are, well, what's right or wrong? Because if you've already answered killing the one person is right, if you have answered that killing the one person is better than letting the 10 people die,
then your answer should be that it would be better for you to die to save the 10 people, right?
Exactly. That's if you answered that is what you should say, right? In theory, that should be your instant response.
It's similar. The difference now is just that the one person who dies is you.
And that's more difficult.
The only thing that's changed. Yeah.
That's a lot more difficult because to put yourself in harm's way is something most people probably avoid.
Right.
Understandably. I mean, shit, I just did it. But that is understandable, though. That is reasonable to go, why the hell would I put myself in harm's way for 10 people I don't know?
Right.
Right? Why am I going to die for 10 people I don't know? Like, right. I wonder how people's answers would shift then if you went, okay, now what if it's 10 people you know and care about deeply? Then what are you going to do?
Right, it would be a different answer.
I think people, okay, and again, what does that show? Like, maybe it doesn't show that morality is a grayscale, but it shows that people's answers are.
Definitely. But that, again, it has to do with the weight of letting, because remember, this is a perceptual thing. We were talking about how it takes you to be disassociated, you know, and to not see another person as a person, to kill them or to let them die, we could say, because of the weight of it, you know, the weight of letting 10 random people die versus the weight of letting 10 of your family members who you love die is different. You know, it's going to hit you differently.
Okay, so this is I agree. Oh, this is fun.
So then we can keep like switching it up. We could say, what if it's 10 random people that you have to kill to save one person you love? Or what if it's 10 people you love?
Here's what
and you have to kill yourself. You know,
honestly, I think, okay, if you're listening to this, I think you should answer this question. Oh, and if you're watching on YouTube, let's encourage engagement. Answer it. Okay.
Yeah. Hop in the comments.
That's what I'm saying, bro. Okay. If using the trolley example, there's a group of 10 strangers, and the trolley is going to go that way and kill them, and there's one stranger on the other track, and you can pull the lever, kill the one stranger, save the other 10. What are you going to do? Okay. And then if you now take that same situation, but you're the one person on that other track, so it's 10 strangers on the other track, you're now on the other one. If you pull it, you save the other 10, but you kill yourself, what are you going to do? And then the final question is, what are you going to do if you're the one person on the other track, and if you pull the lever, you save 10 people that you love and care about? Are you going to let the 10 people you love and care about die? Or are you going to kill yourself to save them? I think
would you, another one that could also be important is 10 people you love and care about, save them, but kill one person you don't know. Yeah.
I was going to ask that, but I honestly think that the answer is going to be the same to the very first question when it's the 10 strangers and one stranger. I think, if anything, people are going to be more quick to pull that lever to save.
Unless their answer was to not do anything and to let the 10 people die.
Oh, that's a good point.
Then your answer might be different, or you might have to think about that differently.
Yeah.
That's because it's now, are you going to let 10 people you love die so that you don't have to be responsible for the death of the one person? And I think that people will do that. I think that people will, they'll let their loved ones suffer just so that they don't have to be responsible, basically.
I think so, but I also think a lot of people would answer, no, I'm going to kill the stranger instead of letting my 10 loved ones die.
Sure, definitely, yeah.
And the thing that would interest me is if people that went, no, I would just let it happen, like you said in the first place, in the first instance. I'm going to let the 10 people die and not save the stranger, like whatever. But then does that change when it's 10 people you love?
Right. And you can strip away the whole train example too, because at the core of it, all the question really is would you save 10 people if it meant you had to kill another person? Or would you let 10 people die so that you didn't have to kill a person? That's all it is. You're just saying, like, it doesn't even matter what the situation is. It's just the bottom line is you have to make a decision between it, basically inaction and letting 10 people die, or saving 10 people, and in order to save those 10 people to have to kill one person.
Okay,
That's basically what it is.
Now let's get into this, because I think this builds off what we're talking about.
Sure.
Do you think that not making a decision is making a decision? Or do you think that... Yeah, basically, if you let it happen...
obviously, see, I think that... What I think is that there's no such thing as not making a decision. Everything is making a decision.
Okay, I agree.
There's no way to not make a decision.
I agree.
Right? Because inaction is a decision, basically. If we're using that example.
I agree.
Say inaction is still a decision. Right?
That's true. So then you're not necessarily deciding to not make a decision. You're deciding to not take action, which is different.
Right. There's technically not that you're not making a decision. What it is choosing inaction. So if someone says, I want you to choose between the colors red and blue, and you say, well, I don't want to choose. You cannot choose between red and blue, but you're still making a choice. You can't say, I'm not making a choice, basically.
Right. You have chosen.
So, right. Because the act of choosing not to choose is still making a choice. You're still choosing something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd love to find that clip, or that little video of us going. You remember 2018 when we stayed up for hours? And then there's a video that I have of you on my Snapchat or on your Snapchat. And you're like, we have decided and we have come to the conclusion that not making a decision is making a decision. It took us 8 hours to come to that, but that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, that wasn't really the goal of the conversation.
No, it wasn't.
It really wasn't. It was just kind of spiraling. I remember we had like a conversation about hot dogs in that conversation too, I think.
We talked oh man. That was a conversation and a half.
Oh man, that was that was completely insane. See, I feel like we'd have to kind of get back in our rhythm more. Like if me and you were hanging out more and kind of together more, then I think that eventually we could probably have a conversation like that again, because that was at a point where me and you were talking a lot. We were hanging out a lot, and we kind of go back and forth on this stuff, and we both had a sort of common wonder about things.
Yeah.
And
I think
so we would have these conversations about things, and then they could just spiral into this web of interconnected ideas and realizations.
Mm-hmm. Well, because think about it. Every time we'd go to, like when we would watch stuff in Jazz Band and we weren't playing, what did you and I do? We just sit in the back and talk about shit. And we
did that every day.
And we did that every day. We would always talk about stuff because we were hanging out literally all the time. And even in that summer, we were still hanging out all the time. So we were talking constantly and bouncing things. That's what's cool about doing the podcast is we actually like get to talk and shit again and like have these conversations. Yeah. It's fun because I don't talk about this with other people. I mean, I do to an extent with some people, but like,
it doesn't get as like, you don't go as
deep,
get as like focused on it. Yeah, you don't go as deep with it, but you also won't stay on it and continue to like push it further to see like where it goes.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think that's a fun thing. And I think that that's a good thing. I mean, that's the whole purpose of this podcast, right? Is to encourage that within each other, to just keep pushing and digging and digging and digging and just keep going with these conversations and trying to seek a deeper understanding of things. Right.
Yeah. Or just seeing where it goes too. Because I realize that ultimately, like with our talks, a lot of it is just trying to get to the next thing. And like, obviously when we're talking, we don't know ahead of time, but then the conversation will start to go to it. So like we started by talking about free will, and then the conversation started naturally going into other philosophical ideas, which took us to the train issue, which took us to this idea of basically all the different ways and variations of that, which we're talking, if we're talking about like morality basically, and then we started talking about the train issue, then what happens is you start talking about, okay, well, there's that one way that it could be with just random people, and then you start changing it up and saying, well, what if it was like this, or what if it was like this? Like, how would that change things? How would that change how you view things? And how does that change how we think of right and wrong, basically?
Yeah.
Because I think that almost proves that it's subjective.
I think it proves it's not absolute.
Okay, yeah, that's more reasonable. It shows that it's not absolute, yeah.
That's what I think it proves it's not absolute.
Because it's hard to say that it's just right or wrong either way.
Yeah. And we can get into this if you want, or it's up to you. I think subjective morality is almost harder to defend sometimes than objective morality. But it just depends, because like, I mean, we got into it earlier. If everything's subjective, then like, I guess we did already talk about this. If everything's subjective, then, you know, if I think it's okay to go kill someone, but, you know, you don't, then whatever, it doesn't matter. It's just a difference of opinion. But, I mean, we kind of already established earlier that it doesn't seem to be just opinions. There seems to be more authority over it.
Sure, yeah.
Which I think... Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, but if I was at liberty to do something about that, then it does matter. You know? If you could just go kill someone, like say someone wanted to kill someone, and they said like, well, you know, it doesn't matter what you think because this is what I think. And then they go kill someone. I mean, what if I go stop them from killing the person? Or what if I kill them to stop them from killing the person? Or what if the person they're trying to kill kills them for trying to kill them? You know?
Yeah.
Then it's like, well, clearly that didn't work out for you, buddy.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So, I mean, ultimately, the action that's taken matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
the consequences of it, I think.
The consequences, right? The weight of it, you know, and to just have a belief, you know, like you could just say you have a belief. Well, but this actually, okay, so where I'm about to go basically is, well, this is what I'm thinking is you can have a belief, but that doesn't translate to action, right? Mm-hmm. That's the whole thing that we were just talking about, is like you can say that I would do this, but in practice, will you actually do that?
Right.
Right? So then what is a belief, basically, is where I'm going with this. Because if you say I believe X, but you do not do X, you do something instead, you do Y or something instead of X, is it reasonable to say that you believe X? You know? Is that possible even? Is it possible to say that I believe killing someone is wrong, for example? Absolutely wrong. Never acceptable. Which seems like an unreasonable view, but say someone believes that. If they actually get into a situation where they kill someone, can they like still believe that? I mean, I guess that in that case you could say like obviously they believe that's wrong, right? But we can see with the train issue, you can say that you wouldn't pull the lever, but if you in practice abstain from action, or if in practice you actually did pull the lever rather, then does that work, you know?
Can you say you wouldn't do it?
Yeah, because it seems like, well, like that doesn't, you know what I'm saying? It's almost like unreasonable. Almost seems like unreasonable.
I go, yeah, no, I agree. I get what you're saying.
So I guess so basically, yeah, just can you have a belief if you don't actually practice the belief? You know, it's almost like you're just saying it.
So I think that this kind of ties back into our conversation of free will, right? And I'll explain why. And this actually kind of helps explain my idea of like, I think we do and we don't when it comes to free will, right? I think it's kind of a... Okay, and I'll tell you why. So I can tell you my belief that I think I would pull the lever, right? Let's just say, yeah, I would pull the lever. If it's, we'll use the stranger scenario. If it's one stranger here, 10 strangers here, if I pull it, I save the 10 strangers, but I kill one. Okay.
Right.
I can tell
you believe that's what you would do.
I believe that that's what I would do. Right? And I'm thinking that because this is what I believe, I'm going to act upon that will and belief. But really, if I don't, and I just let it happen, and I let 10 people die, then...
Do I really believe that?
Do I really believe that? Or did I even really have a choice in the matter? Do you know what I mean? Like, let's say your reaction is just to freeze, right? Let's just say involuntary response is to just do nothing. Then you're kind of like...
maybe out of shock.
Yeah, exactly. Shock. And so in that case, I think you still can say that you believe that you should pull the lever.
Right. But you just didn't. And because there are obvious examples of that all the time in society where we say we should do this, but we don't do that. Right? Right.
Because and a lot of the times I think, especially when you put people in situations like extreme situations like that, like...
Sure.
You know, that's a really extreme situation.
But it actually, on a physiological level, the stress inhibits your ability to think clearly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which, again, I think the reason that ties back to what we were talking about earlier is because it's like, You tell yourself you're going to make a decision. You tell yourself that you have the will to do that. But in that moment, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Because, yeah, exactly. Because what happens when all that pressure kicks in, comes down on you, comes crashing down on you, then what happens? Do you even have the physical
willpower to do it?
Yeah. Do you have like does your brain have the ability to actually make a decision? Like, are you actually able to do that if you're physically paralyzed or something like that?
Good point.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I feel like the people that were like stuck in the saw traps, you know, I feel like that's kind of a good example of that, you know, because you just like throw this person into some trap. And this is why so many of them in the Saw movies, they all die, is because you're put in this situation, this high pressure situation where if you could just be like an outside observer, you might be able to see like, oh, well, like he doesn't have to lift up those weights that are going to poke him with those nails to save this lady from getting stabbed in the face or something. Like he could just unlatch that hook that connects the electrical circuit, you know? But the guy in that situation is never going to figure that out, you know, because he has like 1 minute and this lady's going to get like stabbed in the face. And he's been told, this is how you can save her. So he's not going to like look and see that, oh, the electrical circuit connects here and that's going to like spin her into this thing that's going to impale her. So I'll just disconnect that and then that's it, you know, voila. Because he's in this high pressure situation, right? So he's not even going to like recognize that.
That's a good point.
But it's so obvious to an outside observer, right?
I think that applies to a lot of things. You know, that's obviously in this case morality. It's like outside looking in, it's really easy to go, it's kind of obvious what you should do. But then you're in that situation, it's like, maybe it's not so obvious now.
Right.
So all of a sudden,
the thing with the saw traps is kind of a bad analogy because although it's a good example of being put in a high stress situation, you don't actually have the knowledge usually going into it of what you would do.
Yeah.
So, but like you were saying though, in practice, when you go into something and you have a certain belief that, you know, I would do this or I would do that or this, I should do a certain thing or I shouldn't do a certain thing, then when that pressure kicks in, it might actually just change your actions or cause an action. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just gonna make a point, but
yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting to think about. It's really interesting to think about because, you know, for example, to just kind of go back into that, like the thinking about, you know, what's right and wrong. Most people, it's probably reasonable to say that most people would like to think that they are the protagonist, you know, of their story, basically.
Josh, we call that main character syndrome. No, I'm just kidding.
But I mean, no, we would, right? We'd like to think that we're like the good guy always, right? You know, and that we're gonna do what's right, and that we're, you know, like when a country goes to war, it's never that they're the villain, right? It's always we're gonna go, you know, get the bad guy.
So
and the other person's the bad guy.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you two examples, right?
With the other country.
I'll give you two examples. One of them sort of obvious, the other one's, it's harder. Okay. And Hitler, okay? He thought he was the good guy. He thought what he was doing was morally justified and was morally right. To everyone else, it was obvious that that's BS, and we went to war, and it was pretty clear when we looked at it, okay, we're the good guy, this is the bad guy. Well, now let's look at the wars in the Middle East. You ask certain people here, they will say, no, we're absolutely the good guys. We're the good guys fighting the bad guys. And it's like, sure, but like, maybe not. And that instance becomes harder because then you have to really reflect on, in this instance, your own country and go, it's kind of hard to look at yourself and the country that you live in and that you love and that you're proud of or whatever. Let's just assume that that's the type of person you ask this question. It's hard to go, yeah, no, we could be, not probably, but we could be the bad guy in this situation, right? It becomes harder when all of a sudden it's turned back on you and it's like, see, in this first example where I use Hitler, it's obvious who the bad guy is and who the good guy is. But then when we look at these wars that go on in the Middle East, it's like, well, it's kind of harder to go.
But it's all relative, right? Because I mean, like you said before, I think that's really what you're getting at here is the relativity of it all.
Exactly.
Is that in Hitler's story, Hitler's the good guy.
Right.
In the American story, in the United States, it's the United States that are the good guys. But to the Taliban, we are not the good guys.
No, but see, I'm going to clarify what I'm saying. You're right. You didn't miss what I was saying, but I also, when I'm saying that, to look in and go, oh, maybe we're not the good guys when we look at these things that happen in the Middle East, I'm talking about the thousands of innocent people, civilians, that get caught in the crossfires of our war that you could argue is unnecessary.
Right.
That's what I'm getting at. I'm not talking about fighting the Taliban.
Sure. But if you want to talk about that, then we can get into the conversation of the lesser evil. It becomes, okay, well, if we just left, like, then what happens? Yeah. Then all these terror groups come back full force, take over all these places that we've liberated and that we fought for and everything, and then it all just goes back to the way it was before, and because we're not there at all now, then it gets worse, and all these groups can just take over. And is that worse than if we are there fighting them, basically? Yeah. And holding these towns and these villages and liberating positions and whatnot. I mean, or taking control of them. Is that better than just letting all these groups take over? I mean, we call them terrorists. I don't know if they all would call themselves terrorists, but
they call us that. There's people there, they would call us that. I mean, there's people there, right? And I'm not talking about groups like Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, ISIS. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about normal people, right? Like us. Yeah. People there, just normal people. And I guarantee that some of them view us as the bad guy. And they're just normal people going about their lives. And it's like, are they wrong? I don't know. We can debate that, sure, but I don't know.
It depends on whose perspective you're looking from, right?
Absolutely. And I think what that gets into is that it can seem like morality is hold on, okay, I'm gonna have to cut this part out. I'm getting a call from my mom.
Okay.
I should probably answer. Okay, sorry about that. What was I getting at?
We were talking about the different...
Right, okay, no, I know where I was going. Okay. So, if you're someone that believes in objective morality, right? I think you have to look at the situation, and let's say in this instance, the U.S. is the bad guy. You have to be willing to look past your own biases, your own worldviews, and go, okay, what is true? Now, if you're a moral relativist, subjectivist, and you think, nah, then it doesn't matter. Then it doesn't matter. Then no, we're right. Okay. But if you believe in objective morality, then you have no choice But to look at that, even if it means the people you love and care about, the people that the country you belong to, whatever it may be, you have to be willing to look at that, self-reflect, and go, maybe we're not the good guy. And that's hard to do.
It's absolutely difficult to do, but I feel like the most difficult thing to do is, in that case, to make an actual moral determination as to if there is some kind of objectively morally right thing, then what is it, basically?
Yeah.
That, I think, would be the hardest thing, because it's so hard to know what is true, basically.
Yeah.
So, in order to make a determination like that, we would need to have some kind of sense of what is objectively real. And I don't think that we can have that. I don't think we can have that either. Because we're limited by our subjective experience,
That's true.
We're limited by our own knowledge, our own experiences, our own everything, We're stuck in a body. We have certain senses, certain ways of perceiving things. We can only see so many colors, all of it, And so in order to make something like an objective moral determination, I think that it seems impossible, because for starters, how do you determine the objective nature of things?
So I think that when it comes to objective morality, like I said, I don't think absolute morality exists. Here's the problem with objective morality is everybody that says they believe in objective morality is like, right, and that objective morality is what I think. And it's like, okay. Because here's what I mean. And I'm going to move away from the murder example, because that seems to be... Here, I'll come back to that. Let's use something else that people will say is right or wrong. That actually seems debatable. Let's think of something. I don't know.
Turning right on a red.
That's not really a moral thing, though.
Okay, no, fair enough.
Okay, I don't know. Whatever. The point is this.
Spanking your child.
Huh?
Spanking your child.
What about a child?
Spanking them.
Spanking
discipline.
Okay.
Corporal punishment.
Okay. Sure. Well, okay. The point is, I think people too broadly will talk about morality, and they will say everything that I believe is right and wrong, this is the objective view of the world. And it's like, that's a bit narcissistic. That's probably not true.
Because you're still looking at it from your point of view.
Exactly. Which then I think it's like, that's just a subjective point of view, right? Here's what I think. I think that certain things I'm not saying they are, but can be objectively, morally right or wrong. Not absolute, though. I don't think anything can be absolute. Right? When I say objective, I mean almost all the time this is right or wrong. But there are circumstances where that answer can be different. Killing an innocent person is the example we keep going back to because it's easy. I think to make claims about objective morality, I think you should not get into specifics and go and say that everything that someone can say is right or wrong. No, this is all objective. It's like, no, I think that's just not true. I think that's simply not true. Certain things do seem subjective, and I think that certain things are. But I think when we take killing an innocent person, for example, killing a child, right? I think things like that are easier to build an argument for. No, this is objectively wrong. I'm not saying it's absolutely wrong. I'm saying it's objectively wrong. And then you can get down into things like things that seem much more subjective. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but whatever that may be, right? I think that to make claims about objective morality, I think you need to be sort of general, and you need to accept that not everything you think is right and wrong is the objective view. But I think when it comes to things like killing an innocent person, stealing, rape, whatever it is, I think that you can point to those things and go, these seem to be wrong objectively across all people. This is something that most people, the vast majority of people, would agree on, that these things are wrong and this thing is right. I think there are certain things that almost everybody would agree on, that this is right and wrong. And what's interesting... I think
that the real test is, what would be the case if there were no people? Zero.
So that's none. What I was about to say.
No humans.
So...
yeah.
Here's what I was going to say. There are certain... My teacher pointed this out to me. There's certain animals that will do or not do certain things because of the consequences that it could potentially have upon their group. And
but not necessarily because they think that they're right or wrong, right?
Yes, because they don't have the same conception of right and wrong that we do, but it seems that their reasons for doing them are the same. The potential harm or benefit that this thing brings. If it seems to have severe negative consequences, then they won't do it. And I think at the end of the day, the thing that we need to remember is that we're primates. We evolved. We used to live in small tribal society. I mean, it's just... I think we can look at those things, the way that we evolved, the way that humans lived for a long time, and I think it becomes easy to go, what are things that people have agreed on across all cultures, across all peoples everywhere? That certain things do seem to hold up as being objectively wrong. Now, take that example I used with slavery earlier, that people didn't see as wrong to kill a slave. However, they did see it as wrong to kill an innocent person. They just didn't view the slave as that person, but that belief was still there.
Right.
And so it seems like things like that are true across all cultures and societies. And I think things like that seem to hold true, and that beliefs that people seem to hold true, across all societies and cultures, I think we can point to those things and go, those seem like they are objective.
But they're really not, though.
Okay, why?
Because the evidence that you've provided for that is that all people, that it's consistent across all cultures of people.
That's okay, but that still holds consistent with contract theories of morality, which is that these are things that we agree on, and that we go, okay, this is right, this is wrong. Now, here's the thing. I'm fully aware that means morality is determined on humans. I'm not saying it's not. I'm fully aware of that. I would agree with you there. I don't think morality exists in an abstract form. I don't think that that's true. I don't think morality comes from God.
My question then would be, is that still morality, basically?
Yes, because it's...
If you do something because you know that there's going to be a certain outcome, for example. Say, like if a monkey pushes a button because it knows it's going to get a cookie or something.
Sure.
You know, I guess that's not really a moral thing, but
no,
it's kind of, I think, similar to if you say that, you know, it's so, like with social contract theory, how it says that we do or don't do certain things because of the consequences or the benefits of those things, right?
I mean, okay, yeah.
So I guess my question is, I'm wondering if there's really anything moral about that. You know?
Well, it is because
if you're just doing what logically it makes sense to do, regardless of how you actually morally feel about it, you know, if you think that it is morally right or wrong, if it is just the logical thing to do, where's the moral aspect of that?
Okay, so I think there's more to it, though, than just purely it being the logical. I think that people's emotions definitely play into it. Think about it. And I think we've talked about this before. It would feel weird to kill somebody. It would feel weird to hurt somebody, right?
Yeah.
And I think
unless it doesn't, though.
Huh?
Unless it doesn't, though.
Unless it doesn't, but I don't...
With the guy who bullied you, I don't think he felt like that was wrong.
No, I don't think he did either, but I'm pointing to... Yeah. But what I'm saying is that... Okay. I'm trying to think of how I need to explain this so it makes sense. So you're saying then that is that really morality because all you're looking at is just the purely rational? Okay.
I mean, that's the justification for it, right? Is that it makes sense to do, which is what makes it the right thing to do, right?
Yes. And then you're saying, how is that morality? So then then do you think... So then that depends on your conception of morality. Do you think morality is an abstract thing, or do you think it is something based on our experiences, our rationale, and things like that?
Yeah,
that's what I think. I think it's based on our experiences, our rationality, and things like that. Because not only are things like murder, stealing, shit like that, not only do things like that hold to be true across all societies and cultures, they hold true in certain groups of animals too, where they won't do certain things like that because of the potential consequences that it has.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. Is that a moral thing? You know, like if a monkey doesn't steal something because it knows that it's going to be killed for stealing something, is there anything moral about that? That's what I'm getting at, you know? Or does it just not want to accept the consequences of its actions, therefore it won't take that action because it doesn't want to invoke those consequences? You know? And so for us, like, if you think about like primal humans,
sure,
before we had language, before we could think of right and wrong or anything like that, we just had our primal animalistic instincts. I mean, was there morality if we just did
I think that there was, though, because the reason that is because I do think that we had some basic understanding of what seems to be moral and what doesn't. I'm going to point back to that study of those kids, right? They don't have this super deep understanding of morality. They don't have this. They don't know if it's abstract, if it's rational. They've never thought about shit like that. And yet they could still point and go, okay, this is moral. This is not even a moral claim. And they can tell that there's a difference. And what I'm saying, okay, so I get what you're saying. You're saying if it's purely based on reason and rationale, is that even a moral thing? Is that basically your gripe?
Right. Yeah, and then but you would say that like it isn't just based on that.
No, I don't think it's no, exactly. Yeah. I don't think it's just based on reason, ration, and consequence. I definitely think emotion does play a role, right? I think it does. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I think emotion and instinct plays a role into it is, again, you look at animals that live in societies, and you know what I mean? They're not doing it because of rationality or because of they feel some divine sense of right and wrong. They're doing it because it feels like you shouldn't do this. And not only does it feel like this is weird, there's consequences to those actions.
So then you're saying that you believe that these feelings, these kind of gut feelings of right and wrong, or I shouldn't do this, extends to all these other animals.
I'm not saying all. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to make that claim that it's all.
So certain animals that are capable.
Yes, I would love to point out exactly what my teacher said. I don't have it on me. But he... You know what? Fuck it. I can find it. Hold on. It's on my laptop.
Okay.
Let me just find it. This is going to drive me nuts. Because I feel like I'm not articulating what I'm trying to say well, so it's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
We're at about 2 hours, by the way.
Cool. So, yeah, I think that basically if... I see where you're going. So maybe you're saying like certain animals have these feelings similar to the feelings that humans have. And I think that the question is that how many creatures have feelings like that, perhaps? And
I guarantee you it's not all of them.
Sure, of course not. I mean, if you look at a sea anemone, it's like a sea urchin,
right,
or like a sponge or something, and it's like it doesn't even have like a nervous system. How could it possibly feel anything? It literally can't.
Right.
You know? So, but then I would extend the whole question of morality, you know, like to those creatures as well. Is like,
so does it right exist or wrong outside of,
for like like there were animals that kill things for fun. Is that wrong? Is it wrong that they do that?
That's a good point.
So I think if you can say that that's wrong in the same way that a person killing people for fun is wrong, then maybe you could have some kind of argument for, yeah, there seems to be some kind of objective morality, but to those animals, that doesn't exist. I mean, you know, it's just doing what comes naturally. There are some animals that are just vicious. They're just vicious animals, and they eat each other and they eat other animals. So,
okay, I can't find it. It's going to be too much of a pain to find. I'm not going to be able to find it. But, okay, so I do think that I feel like I should... I do think morality and our conceptions and understanding of it are based on human understanding. I do think that. I agree with you there. I do think that. I think that other creatures besides humans will make similar decisions for similar reasons that seem moral, right? Killing, stealing, whatever. But I do think that morality as a concept is dependent upon people. And the reason that is because I think that if you don't think that morality is dependent upon people, and you do think morality is an abstract form, then you have to get into what is that abstract form? Where does it come from? I'm going to tell you what the most common answer is to that. It's God, divine command theory. I don't believe that at all. I don't think and mind you, I believe in God, but I don't think morals necessarily
come from God.
Right.
Yeah.
Necessarily. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they do. I don't know. But what I think is that they don't, because once you get into that, like I said, if you think that morals aren't dependent upon people and human rationality, and even more than that, the way that just our feelings are when we do certain things, you are basically assuming that morals are an abstract thing, and I don't think that at all. I don't think morality is an abstract force.
Right.
So yeah.
So there's like one example that I thought of earlier, basically, and it is a biblical example. And it's basically if a nation goes to war with another nation and defeats that nation without killing all of the people in that nation. Like, let's say like God, like, cause this, okay, so this is something that happened in the Bible, is So you have one nation of people, and God commands them to completely wipe out another nation and to leave not anybody living. Not one person. Doesn't matter gender,
Right.
age, doesn't matter. Kill them all. So the king spares a single boy.
Okay.
That boy then grows up to be the leader of a new nation that defeats that nation that initially conquered his people.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one person. It's so the question is that right or wrong, basically, for him to have spared that one boy against God's will? Because the point of this example in the Bible is to show that, like, God said kill them all in order so that your people could live in peace. You spared one, and that one inspired the rise of that nation again, basically, which then turned around and conquered your people. You would have been fine if you'd killed them all, like he said, but because you were merciful on a single person, that the whole thing falls apart.
Okay, so then... Okay, what you're talking about is divine command theory, that what is right and wrong is what God says is right and wrong, and I think that that's I think there's a problem with that, because I don't think it makes sense. Because here's the problem with it. One, you cannot validate its existence, right? Whereas with practical beliefs and morality, it is easier to go, okay, it exists based upon human rationale.
I'm not really getting at the divine command theory, though. I'm more getting at...
But that is what you just talked about, though.
Yes. What that is, it is a biblical example, but what I'm actually talking about is it right or wrong that he let the kid live? It's a marginal thing, right? Okay. Because if he had wiped out all the people, him and his people would have been able to live in peace forever, we could suppose, right?
Okay.
But because he didn't, his nation was then conquered in the future.
Okay, so then,
right?
So here's the problem with this example, my first thing is going to go, right, but what would have happened if he had just never done anything and never attacked?
Then his people would have been conquered.
How does he know that, though?
I don't know. It's the Bible. It's a story.
Okay,
right?
so that's the problem
But the idea is that they go and they kill all these people before they are conquered themselves, basically. And because one person, it's a marginal example, right? So it's like the idea that you left one person alive, and that person was the ember that led to the rising again of that nation, who then conquered you, right? So it's like what you see in the Middle East. It's like, how do you get those wars to stop? Someone has to kill everyone on the other side. That's it. That's the only way.
I don't think that that's true.
All right, well, some people might say that, right?
Sure.
Because that seems like the easiest way for it to stop. It's like if you have two sides fighting.
Yeah, but okay, but think of that practically. Like, you literally couldn't. You literally cannot do that.
I mean, you're talking about like it's just full on genocide, basically.
Yeah.
It's like what if the Nazis succeeded in wiping out the Jews?
Right.
I mean, they wouldn't, but like, let's hypothetically say they killed every single Jew. Then what? Right? Yeah. It's like, but we can figure like, well, then we would know that they wouldn't just stop with the Jews. Then they would go to the next thing and the next thing. And then eventually they'd start fighting each other. Right. So when there was nothing left for them to conquer. Right.
So when you pointed to that biblical example, the problem is this.
It's just an interesting thing to think about. It's
know, but it is. But what I'm saying is this: I'm outside looking in. I wasn't raised Christian. I'm not going to look at this from a Christian perspective. My first instinct is going to go, how do you know that this other kingdom would have conquered you beforehand? You preemptively went and slaughtered everyone, which also, by the way, how does that make sense? If you were so worried about them conquering you, how were you able to literally kill everybody except for one person? I just don't think that that's feasible, nor does it make sense, but sure.
Sure. It's a hypothetical.
It's an extreme hypothetical, and it's the problem, and I know this isn't what you were getting at, but The problem with saying that morals come from God is that a lot of the times in particular religions, God seems to command people to do some very interesting things like that. And it's like, if God commanded me to go kill my entire family, is that... And yes, I'm using an extreme example, but honestly, I can point to another one, but I don't want to piss people off, so I'm not going to do that. But if God commanded me to do that, right, then according to divine command theory, it's just because whatever God commands is right. And God commanded me to kill my entire family, therefore it's justified. And I'm like, I don't think that makes sense, like, at all. Not even a little bit. And the reason that I think that like, personally, I don't necessarily believe in attributing morality to God, because I think when you do that, it becomes really easy. It becomes really easy to go, okay, here. Tsunamis. We'll use a tsunami, for example. Let's say there's a tsunami that destroys an entire island. And if you believe in God, then I think it's fair to say that's an act of God. If you believe in God, and God is all-powerful, and God controls it, sure. Then I think that you can say that was in God's power. Or God could have stopped it. Right? And this goes into the thing earlier. God either decided, I'm going to smite you, or I'm just not going to do anything. But like we said earlier, not making a decision is making a decision. The problem with this is this. And again, this is because I believe morality to be dependent upon us. And I do think that morality is based on our experiences of the world. I think when you start to attribute our human understanding to God, God doesn't start to look all that great. I think the other problem is this. There is no way to verify that God commanded anyone to do anything. You cannot prove that at all. You can't disprove it either. That's the other thing. Right? Just like the concept of God in general. You can't prove God exists, but you can't disprove God exists either. If someone says God commanded me to murder my entire family, I can't prove or disprove that actually happened. But that's the issue. Is there's no way to validate it. Whereas I think when you take this understanding that we have of what is right and wrong and things that are generally agreed upon throughout all societies, it's easier to validate those things and go, okay, it makes sense. We can look to these different examples and the way that we have, as humans, interacted with each other. And I think that's the biggest issue with divine command theory. And the other problem is this. It's a simple question that was posed by Plato, Socrates. Is something good because God commands it? Yeah, is something good because God commands it? Or does God command something because it is good? If whatever God commands is good, then if God commands me to go to your house right now, Josh, and sorry, dude, but I'm going to have to put a pillow over your face tonight because God commanded me to, it's justified. But does that seem true? Does that seem justified? I think the obvious answer is no. It seems ridiculous. Okay. But then the problem is if God commands something that is good, then that means morality exists outside of God, and it is so powerful that an all-powerful being has to submit to morality's will, and that doesn't seem to make sense either.
Right.
That's why I think divine command theory is dumb as shit, and interestingly enough,
it doesn't work.
The church actually abandoned divine command theory. The church, for the longest time, would say that, but they abandoned it because of the problems people started to notice with it, with that simple question that people started asking.
Yeah.
Then they moved to natural law theory, which says basically what is natural is right and what is unnatural is wrong. And that was the common argument.
What even is natural and unnatural?
I don't know. It's
if humans are natural, then everything is natural technically.
And they would look at the purpose. Okay, so that was actually the argument the church would use against homosexuality, is it's unnatural. The functions of male, female is to...
But isn't the fact that we do it make it natural by definition?
I don't know, dude. It's a really shitty argument, okay? But it's what is natural is what is right, and what is unnatural is what is wrong. And it's like, okay, so is using a prosthetic leg wrong? Because it's unnatural. It's not part of us. It's not...
It's right, but what is unnatural, right? Unnatural just means like human interference is what it is. So again, it's just a narcissistic way of looking at things. Really.
Exactly.
We don't really mean unnatural. What we really mean is human created, or that it was a byproduct of human interference or human ingenuity or whatever.
Well, and
had something to do with
yes and
us.
no, because the people will point,
right?
like the example of homosexuality and the natural law theory against it, which by the way I don't believe, but it's basically that the natural, the proper function of male and female is to
copulate, to
have
procreate.
babies.
Yeah,
that is the function of sex organs.
And
it's
is the
like,
function, yes.
That is the function, sure, but
yeah.
Again, okay, oh man, I really don't want
that is like the evolutionary function.
No, that's true. But then it's like, but does that make it right or wrong? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. How is it, okay, sure, you can say it's unnatural or not, whatever. Even if it is unnatural, even if somehow you were able to make that argument, which I'm sure you could, does that make it right or wrong, though? Again, I like using the prosthetic limb example. That's not natural.
There are other ideas about us having, like, animalistic tendencies, really. Sure. Or that, some people will, like, divide us, into two parts, and that's the animal part, and then there's sort of, like, your greater mind or something, And people call it different things, but it's essentially you have a side of you that is like an animal, your urges, you're just, wanting to do things, you're just primal urges, things like that, that are, a lot of times like unacceptable things, like you just wanting to, reach into just like go into a restaurant and just like steal all the food so you can eat it or something. I don't know. Or just like have sex with a random person or something, like these kinds of things, that we consider like, oh, like that's wrong or whatever. So these are like animalistic urges. And then that's like, some people will think of that as separate from the part of you that has the ability to fight those urges, basically, into like the human part or the higher mind or whatever, which can say like, no, that's wrong. Like, we're not going to do that.
To be fair, I do think that sort of does hold up, because that does seem to be one of the major things that separates us from most other species on this planet, is the fact that we have the ability to very deeply rationally think about things. That's not to say other species cannot, but to our knowledge and our understanding, that seems to be one of the major things that separates us from other primates even. Mm-hmm. They can't do the things that we can do. They can't do math to the same level that we can do. They can't... their brains literally do not function the same way that ours do. So, I do think that it's like, okay, yeah, when you really come down to it, what are we, primates? That's true. At the same time, it does seem like there is a very clear difference between humans and other primates, for example. Like I said, our ability to very deeply analyze and rationally think about things. To not just be impulsive and instinct-based. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. An ape isn't going to think about the stuff we've talked about the past 2 hours. It literally it does not have the mental capacity to do so.
Yeah.
Right? But we do. And I think that's what separates us from other.
That can go off into a whole conversation about
For sure.
language and what gives us this ability that we seemingly have and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. But we got to wrap it up. So.
Yeah, we do got to wrap up. It's late.
Yeah. So I want to go back to real quick to the moral example, the biblical example I gave earlier. And I want to just say, because it's hypothetical, just so like hypothetically, if we could say that you did know, just somehow, you just knew with absolute certainty that your neighboring nation was going to, in the future, enslave your people or something,
sure.
or they were going to conquer you, and it was going to lead to the suffering of your people or the extermination of your people. Would it's actually the same question that we've been asking this whole time is, do you not act or do you act?
That's true.
Basically, it's, do you then preemptively conquer them? I'd say you could conceivably wipe them out first completely. Mm-hmm. Would it be right or wrong for you to do that or not to do that, knowing that they would do that to you, basically? I think in that example, most people would say like your inaction is called for there. That if they're going to do that, that doesn't make you the bad guy, morally speaking, right? Like, mm-hmm. you would be the oppressed in that situation. You have every right to defend yourself from their attack. Mm-hmm. But I think that most people would say that you don't have the right, that you shouldn't be, that it wouldn't be correct, that it wouldn't be morally right for you to preemptively attack them or to conquer them before they could conquer you, even if you knew that was going to happen. 100%. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
You said, what do I think?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a very extreme hypothetical. Very extreme. Okay. If you knew that this... Okay, there's several approaches you could take to this, and we don't have time to do it. So I'm just going to give a very simple answer.
Okay.
If you knew that this other nation would conquer you, enslave your people, I guess the question that I would ask is, does the conquering and enslavement of your people justify the genocide, let's call it what it is, of this other nation? I don't know.
Or is it better to let that happen to you, basically?
But it's not the same thing that happens to you, though. That's the thing, right? What happens to you is...
Or it is. Say it is, right?
Well, then, yeah, fuck it. Of course. If you knew with absolute certainty... Okay, fine. Well, that's a different thing. Yeah. If you knew with absolute certainty that this neighboring nation would completely smite you, right?
Yeah.
Again, this goes to show morality is gray, because this is not a black or white thing. I think you could justify, preemptively striking. However, if it wasn't the entire genocide of your nation, and it was, again, I'm not saying this is good, but if it was the enslavement and conquering of your people, then my question is, does that justify the entire genocide of this? Now, if you knew with absolute certainty that that was going to happen, sure. The problem is you can't know that.
Sure. You can't, yeah. I mean, we could simplify that example. Instead of nations, we could just say, if you somehow, just knew that another person was going to kill you, and there's like nothing you could do about it. If you let them come to kill you, they will win. No matter whatever you do to defend yourself,
and so you have to preemptively strike.
Yeah, is it justified for you to kill them first before they can kill you?
See, I like what you did there, because now you've put it on me. Right?
Yeah.
And this is how the answer changes. I want to say yes, right? Because I'm thinking self-preservation, right?
But you will die. It's just a hypothetical. This could never happen in real life, probably.
No,
but
there's no way. You can't know shit like that with absolute certainty. You can just guess.
if it meant that you would die to not kill this other person, is it right or wrong to kill them or not?
I don't think it's right or wrong, black or white. I think it's if you knew with absolute certainty that this person would kill you, but the only way to save yourself is to preemptively kill this person.
Yeah.
If you knew that with absolute certainty, I think your action is justified. Do not think that makes it entirely right. However, I don't think it makes it wrong either.
And why not?
Because if you know with absolute certainty... Okay, here's the other problem, dude. Okay, what is their reason for doing it? Did you do something to this person? Or are they just going to do it for no reason?
Right, we could just say they're just going to kill you.
If they're just going to do it for no reason, then kind of self-defense. Preemptive self-defense, sure, but you know with absolute certainty. That's the problem with this, is you know with absolute certainty that this person is going to do this if you don't do anything.
I mean, you'll go to jail for the rest of your life for killing them. So
yeah, or you'll be dead.
Yeah.
And so I guess in that situation, yeah, I would think if you know with absolute certainty that they will kill you if you don't do anything preemptively, I think it's basically like self-defense at that point.
I guess it is. It's like pre-defense.
Yeah. So
it's like,
and I do think that killing someone in self-defense is justifiable. So
okay, I like how you changed that. It went from, well, you're not really just killing them now. It's because you know they're going to kill you, so it's...
Because it's... Right, but do you see why that was an important thing to really emphasize, though? You get why I did that, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're not just killing some random person for the sake of... You're doing it because if you don't, you're going to die.
I actually disagree with you.
Okay, why?
See, because I think that... So in this situation, I know... Somehow, I just know that there's another person and they're going to kill me.
Okay.
Well, first off, we'll just start with the basics. I just feel wrong. I just wouldn't feel right killing them. So we'll start there.
No, I'm not saying I would either.
So the question is, would I do it to save myself? And I wouldn't do it.
Okay.
So let me actually kind of stray away from the whole idea of, well, do I think it's right or wrong for me to do it? I wouldn't do it because I don't want to kill them. Mm-hmm. So I know that I wouldn't do it.
So you asked if it was right or wrong.
Right. First, so now if we're saying, is it morally right or morally wrong for me to kill them to save myself? I don't think that self-preservation is an honorable reason to do something.
I think self-defense is.
I think self-defense is.
And isn't this a case of self-defense? If you know with absolute certainty that if you don't do anything, this person's going to kill you, isn't it self-defense? Again, you can't know something like that, but if you somehow did, it's self-defense.
Is it self-defense? That's the question. See, because I'm not convinced that it is self-defense, I think. I don't think I'm convinced that it's self-defense. Because it hasn't happened yet, even though you know it will happen.
But doesn't that foresight give you, basically, it puts you in a situation that, here's what it puts you in the situation of, let's say someone came in my room right now and tried to kill me and I killed them in self-defense. That foresight basically already puts you in that situation. Does it not?
No. Because you know that when the situation comes, that they will be victorious in every possible case. So you know that you will die. It's not the same as if someone just tries to kill you and you
But
kill
doesn't
them.
that knowledge, though,
Self-defense.
what I'm saying is knowing that that's going to happen, right? Doesn't that put you in the situation of self-defense? If you know, and here's why, I'll explain why. If someone tried to attack me right now and tried to kill me, I know that I'm going to die if I don't do anything.
Because they're trying to kill you.
Because they're trying to kill me. That's just, in that situation,
they're not trying to kill
know-
you. You just know that they
yet.
will. Right.
you know they will. But I think that general idea of if someone came in here and tried to kill me right now, I know that they want to kill me, and I know that they will kill me if I don't do anything.
So you're saying
That
if
holds
you
up
just,
the same. And what I'm
if
saying
you just
is,
knew that ahead of time.
exactly. What I'm saying is, if you know that if you don't do anything, just like in this situation, if someone tried to kill me right now and I don't do anything, if I don't do anything in this situation, and I know for a fact that they'll kill me if I don't do anything, I'm viewing it as the same thing. And that, if in both situations, if I do nothing, I am going to die. However, if I take measures to protect myself, I will not. I'm not saying that it makes it right, but I'm also emphasizing that I don't think it makes it wrong. I think that it can be justified. Now, I do think that they're different, right? I think that if someone tried to kill me right now and is physically attacking me right now and I kill them in self-defense, I think that is more on the side of morally justifiable than preemptively killing them.
Even if you knew that they would.
Even if you knew. I do think it's a bit different, right? Because you're preemptively doing it. They're not actively attacking you.
They might not even know that they're going to kill you.
Exactly.
They don't even know you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I agree with you there. But I don't think that makes it wrong. I don't think it makes it right at all. I just think it can be justified, and it is justifiable.
I think that's an appropriate stance. I agree with that. But I think that I would definitely find it to be better to let the situation come to pass.
Okay.
As opposed to killing a person who doesn't know you, isn't trying to kill you, had no intent maybe at that time to kill you, or anyone.
For sure. Well, I mean, hey, like I said, I'm just answering the question, do I think it's justified or not? But would I do it? Probably not. I'm probably in the same boat as you. I don't think I'd do it.
If you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, you know?
Right.
Like, would you do it?
See,
I wouldn't fucking do it.
No, you're killing a baby because at that point it is an innocent child. What has it done?
Exactly, because it's not Hitler yet.
No.
Even though you know what's going to happen, are you going to go back in time and kill baby Hitler, you know?
Probably not.
No.
Most people aren't going to kill a baby.
Yeah.
Even if you know what that baby turns into.
Yeah.
So.
I think this has been a really interesting conversation.
Yes. We focus a lot on ethics and morals. It was fun. I like it.
Definitely. Very fun, very fun. Well, I think that's it then.
Yeah, if you made it this far, thank you for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. We hope that you've enjoyed the show. Really interesting stuff to think about here.
Yeah, dude. This was fun. This is interesting.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
We could go on for hours and hours about all kinds of different stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things we mentioned that we could have just gone off on, but we tried not to.
I know, like earlier I was like, I need to stop because I'm just going to keep going into it.
We need to wrap it up. So
yeah.
Thank you everyone for listening.